Very happy to welcome to our show Soft Power, a community leader and intellectual visionary, as well as a civilizational strategist, Mr. Rakesh Kaul. Rakesh ji did his undergraduation in engineering from IIT Delhi, and then he was in the USA. He worked on solar power for NASA, but he also got an MBA from the Booth School in Chicago and ran several companies before he retired. And even today, he does do a lot of work in the business world, but he is currently the vice chairman of the Indo-American Arts Council and an author, as well as a very important thinker. Thank you, Rakesh ji, for joining us.
Namaste, Makarand.
His latest passion, of course, is water, and our program today is on water consciousness. So, Rakesh ji, before I ask you what you mean by water consciousness, let me just direct our viewers to this article that you published in the Fair Observer on the scarcity of water in both California and India. It's a very important article and has gained considerable traction. Can you tell us what you're trying to argue in that article, please?
Yes, if you look at the problem of water, let's start with the US lens and to some degree reflected globally. The President Biden set up a task force to tackle the problem of water, which published its findings about a year ago. And you can see that the very first question you should ask yourself when you say water is what their starting point is. They see water as an infrastructure problem. Infrastructure, of course, brings to mind dams, pipes, and reservoirs with massive filtration plants. And fundamentally, that problem is only going to compound the disaster that the world has gotten itself into. In my article, I took the civilizational Indic approach, where for thousands of years, we have understood the problem of water, and we will talk about that in our stories, which will astonish your viewers. But more importantly, our solutions came from a very different point of view. The three questions on water. What is water? Who owns water? Is it the utility company as the West sees it, or the Delhi Jal Board? And most importantly, what is our relationship with water? What is our sambandh with water?
This is so important, Rakeshji. I'll just jump in there. And I think that what you're flagging is the fact that water is not so much an issue or problem of infrastructure, but it's really a question of consciousness, which brings us to the title of our conversation today. So what do you mean by water consciousness? And earlier we spoke about water quotient, like emotional quotient. I think this is also very significant because when we talk about soft power, you know, what can be softer than water, and yet what can be more powerful than water?
Yes, we do not understand and appreciate the power of water. And in the Indic civilization, water had fourfold powers. Fourfold powers. Creation, sustenance, purification, and transformation. And we will explore each one of those powers in greater detail in the program. The knowledge of these four powers is essential to developing a water quotient. Just as IQ measures or attempts to measure your intelligence, or EQ measures your emotional water quotient, I will submit, will become of enormous importance very, very quickly, with incredible urgency, the defining metric of the survival of the human race. We have already lost more than 1,000 forms of sea life because we have lost our water quotient.
So, would you say that our relationship with water needs to be transformed, needs to be fixed? Because the problem is not so much with water as with human beings and how we've misused, abused, in fact, misunderstood water.
The relationship of human beings with water is not a relationship of duality. It is commonly understood by most people who think of water as an object, that our bodies are somewhere around 2/3 water.
More than 80% water.
But when you look at it at a molecular level, our bodies could be as much as 99% water. So the starting point of the relationship with water is a deep contemplative fundamental recognition, a pratyabhijna movement of realization. I am water. And as I will submit to you, I said the four powers of water. The last one is transformation. Let me jump to that because it fits into this right now. I'm from Kashmir, and the secret supreme of Kashmir is Kundalini Shakti. My grandfather, Pandit Gopi Krishna, was the first yogi to bring that knowledge to the West. And Kundalini Shakti, Mooladhara chakra, is the chakra of potency, but it's locked potency. We reside in the Mooladhara chakra. We can't break out of it. That's why the presiding deity of Mooladhara chakra is Ganesha, the kickstarter. But the second chakra is Swadhisthana. Swadhisthana is the chakra of water. It's the chakra of flow. It's the chakra of fluidity, creativity, also sexual desire. That's why in all the stories of enlightenment, whether Islam, Buddhism, the rishis, the first trap they fall into as they march down this pathway is they reach the Swadhisthana chakra, they gain the first enlightenment, but they are subjected to sexual temptation. It's all laid out. And it's a very hard chakra to cross, but cross you must. But for the folks who today are embarked on this spiritual revolution, because there is a spiritual revolution sweeping around the world. people are looking for answers beyond the physical. My submission is, before you can say I'm Shiva, or before you can say I am this God, or I'm that God, or I'm a follower of this, you have to first embrace I am water. Because without that psychosomatic state of fluidity, you aren't going to go anywhere.
So, Rakeshji, this is a wonderful insight that before you say Aham Brahmasmi, you should say Aham Jalosmi, I am water. Or so please tell us now, Apa, Jal, Neer, all these wonderful words that we have for water, dozens and dozens of them from our tradition and also from Kashmir. Please tell us now exactly what you mean by water consciousness.
So let's begin our journey at inception. And you'll use this wonderful phrase, Aham Brahmasmi. So let's go all the way to that very profound hymn of creation, the Nasadya Sukta. And there in our hymn of creation, we are told first there was cosmic water. It was unilluminated, it was dark cosmic water. Out of that cosmic water came Brahman, what you just taught. So even before Brahman, there was water. Then after Brahman came desire, will, Ichha Shakti. Then came the sages, and then came the gods. We worship the gods, but the gods came very late in the picture. The source is the cosmic water. And this is the story of our creation. But the Rig Veda doesn't stop there. There is an incredible story in the Rig Veda that now, to some degree, there is some scientific history also. And this is the fascinating story of Vritra. Should I share the story of Vritra?
Yes, please. In fact, it's such a profound story because it also brings us to Sri Aurobindo's secret of the Veda, where he sees the entire, cycles of narratives in the Veda. It's all about the dark forces who want to dam and capture and control the waters. And Indra and the forces of light are all about releasing the water, which also brings us to Saraswati, the great Saraswati civilization, and Saras, that which flows beautifully. So all these are deeply interlinked and I know very close to your heart. So please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think you just summarized that story beautifully. Vritra is a dana, with dana meaning to contain, to trap. And he is the first, you could call it dragon demon, because he's got partially the body of a serpent. And what he does is he traps all the waters. He traps the monsoons. He traps the Rigvedic rivers. But most importantly, he traps Varuna, who's the ruler of the Adityas, the ruler of the ocean. And so there isn't a drop of water. And as we know, there cannot be creation without water because we come from water. And so then there is a creation not only of Indra, but more importantly, there's a fascinating creation of the lightning bolt, the Vajra, which comes from the bones of Dadichi, who makes this incredible sacrifice when the rishis said, they were told, you have to find a rishi whose bones can be fashioned into his weapon. And all the rishis said, no, nobody's going to make that kind of a sacrifice. That's one organ donation. Nobody is prepared to do, give up all of their bones. And Dadichi gives that. And then, of course, the waters, there's an incredible fight. Ritra uh, uh, smashes Indra's jaws. He smashes him, and then he swallows him, and then Indra has to come out of his stomach. And he even swallows his elephant. It's an incredible battle. I want all of your viewers to go back and read that story. Eventually, Indra slays Ritra. The waters are released, and now creation can begin. It is an incredible story, and it basically is the birth of fertility, and it symbolizes that you know the critical importance that for the first time in the Rig Veda we have a story that is essentially trying to talk about a drought. So it's the first time. Now, of course, everybody, you mentioned Saraswati, and the fact that Saraswati, we have the story in the Mahabharata, is given the task of carrying fire to the ocean. And the fire burns Saraswati, and Saraswati disappears. So that's a beautiful story. But Rig Veda precedes that. The first environmental story of water and drought, because Ritra is the lord of drought. So we can look to our civilization and say, hey, we understood drought perhaps earlier than anybody else. And now science is beginning to do analysis of oxygen isotopes and other things. And I think it was Scientific American that actually published a paper. Rig Veda, people think it's 3,500 years old. Some think it's older. But science has shown that around 4,000 years ago, there was a series of intense droughts that came across the plains of India. And around 4,200 years ago, there were actually very serious droughts that took place. And so this story is the first story that alerts us that, hey, drought is a threat to human existence, and it's something that we need to be conscious of. And so I bring the word consciousness in the context of human survival. And this has continued. So it's not just in the Harappan region that we have this first evidence. From the year 1870 to 2018, there have been 26 major droughts in India. So you have to learn from your history and say, the Lord of Drought is being orders of magnitude worse than Yam. Yama may come and kill individually, but Lord of Drought can wipe out humanity.
Rakeshji, wonderful. Let me also ask you about this other creation story, though we don't want to be completely mired in our past and in our mythology, but the great story of Samudra Manthan, which again is a story of churning of the primeval waters with the serpent, as the rope and the pestle. So this is also, I guess, a very profound symbolic story. So can you please shed light on how that connects with our concern for water and with water consciousness?
Yeah, so it's certainly a continuation of water as the creative force of life. So it's in the genre of the first power of water, creation, and as I said, sustenance, and then purification and transformation. But this particular Samudra Manthan story is very profound. It's very profound because out of the churning of water comes Amrita. And Amrita is the grantor of immortality. See, there's only one difference between the Devas and the Asuras. I mean, there are lots of good Asuras, right? Lots of good Asuras. But there's only, and the Asuras have power, the Devas are weak. So Asuras have everything, but Devas have one thing. Devas have immortality. Devas have Amrita. And so, where is this Amrita? And this Amrita is within you. When you understand, I am water. When you understand that this is an internal story, the story that your cosmic water inside you has to be churned. What is the manthan inside you? And in Kashmir, of course, we call it the stir, the spanda, the vibration. What is it that you have to churn and do manthan inside you so that you can create the nectar and amrita inside you? And
Which
it
is
is
linked to
that nectar
Kundalini.
and amrita inside you
I'm
that,
saying it's linked to Kundalini, as you mentioned earlier.
yes, these are all linked. These are all different ways of trying to, they're all trying to find stories and easy way to teach us that how do you transform the self, but in this case through the water lens and achieve immortality.
But then what about the wish, the very toxic poison that also comes out of the churning and which
Oh,
Shiva
sure.
can contain?
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Wishes, now there is wish all over. There is no Amrita, right? And there's no Shiva to, in Rig Veda, when there's a huge battle between Indra and Mitra, Rishi Agastya swallows all the water because the demons are hiding in the water. It's not just the demon story in Kashmir, where I'm from, where Jalod Baba is hiding in the water, and then eventually the Satisar lake is drained and he is exposed, and then he's killed by goddess Sharaka. But demons are hiding in water everywhere. And Agastya then swallows the water, and then the demons are exposed, hiding, and the gods come and slay them. So now who's going to swallow all the fish? Well, nobody's out there. We have to swallow it, and we have to figure out the answers. And we'll talk about the solutions maybe in a later program. But this story is an eternal story as to what we as human beings have to be thinking about in our relationship with water. It is not an object, it is a subject. It is not that, it is I.
And it's not just a resource, as it were, to be used or abused or sold and bought, but it is the very elixir of life, as you said. It is the container of Amrit. I want to ask you in that context, and also the context of the great cleansing that we all in India certainly, we go to our tirthas, we go to our water bodies with this tremendous respect that they will cleanse us. I want you to reflect on the story of Ganga, the great goddess which comes from the heavens, and Shiva again holds her in his matted locks. And today we believe that Ganga is mokshadaini. She confers, mukti on us and cleanses us of all our sins and contaminations.
Yeah, so, the Ganga story is both an ancient and a modern story. And I'm so glad that you mentioned it. Ganga exists in three worlds. It descends to the earth. It comes from the cosmic waters. So it descends on earth And in that sense, it is no different than an avatar descent from a metaphysical like Vishnu to a physical like Ram. So, in my eyes, the river Ganges is uh, is the earliest avatar that we have that comes to basically revive life. And I think many viewers know that King Bhagirath performed very severe penances to the river Ganges in heaven so that it could come and purify his ancestors who had been cursed by a rishi on Sagar Island. And he had cursed them and they had died. And she comes and through her waters grants them salvation. They actually come back to life for a day. And it demonstrates the power of Ganga. But here is now the modern continuation of that story. Next to Sagar Island uh, is a very small island, Lohachara in the Sundarban area. And tragically, it is the first inhabited island in the world uh, that has vanished in the world due to rising waters caused by global warming, deforestation, and reckless extraction of groundwater. And it disappeared in 1996. All the residents were forced to relocate to neighboring islands. In December 2006, Indian researchers gave the definitive confirmation of his disappearance, and then that led to international press coverage. So, this island, in a sense, Lohachara, is a clarion call that uh, ocean waters are rising, that it may be first, but it won't be last. One day, Sagar Island is gradually getting eroded, and these waters are rising. And so these stories, they have a message that is timeless. These are not children's fables. One of the things I really feel bad about is how much of our literature today basically regurgitates the past stories. And I don't mind that because people have to be there to popularize. But in the regurgitation, they really dumb down the profound truths inside these stories. And I really wish people would go and not convert these stories of Ganga into fantasies and other things and myths, but really try to understand that, you know, the story of Vritra was taking drought, a real life problem in human beings' lives, and trying to enshrine it so that it would be carried to future descendants as a warning. That's what stories are. They travel through space and time, but don't dumb them down. Please don't dumb down our stories.
Thank you, Rakeshji. I wanted to ask you in this context that don't you think that we now face a kind of almost paradoxical double whammy? On the one hand, we are depleting all our groundwater and we are on the brink of a drought. In California, as you mentioned, as also in India, in the cities that I know reasonably well, Delhi, Bangalore, there's a tremendous depletion of groundwater. At the same time, the oceans are once again rising because of global warming. And as you said, populations are being threatened, including India's neighbor, the Maldives, which is only less than 15 meters high at its highest point, or even less. And they've already got a plan to evacuate the entire population to Australia. So we've got a completely opposite kind of problem. And that is why the water quotient and the water consciousness are the key, because if you apply a mechanical type of approach to solving the problem, you won't be fluid or dynamic enough to grapple with the challenge of water.
Yeah, water quotient is critical because water belongs to all of us. And so the water problem will be only solved as well as the weakest link amongst us. So until an entire society says, we're going to keep the Ganges River pure, you're not going to be able to solve the problem of pollution. It's all or nothing. That's why what I am arguing for when I talk about water consciousness and water quotient is that this whole infrastructure utility approach is doomed to failure because one rotten apple will spoil the whole thing. And today around the world, we have a massive problem. Let me start with Kashmir, my homeland. We know that when people would enter the valley and see the first view of the valley, right at the entrance of the valley, there were 500 ponds and lakes. My own town of Ranawari, it was described as the Venice of the East. It had these beautiful canals covered by trees. There's nothing to be found. It has all gone away. I know that after our genocide and ethnic cleansing, the Kashmiri Pandit have argued for their right to their homeland. But here is the interesting thing, Makarand. In modern times, the last genocide, really sort of its roots started in 1931 when the Britishers sent this guy Abdul Qadir to start agitation against the Maharaja. There was a huge agitation. Some Muslims were shot by the police controlling the demonstrators. And because the majority didn't know what to do, they went and killed Hindus. So they slaughtered the Hindus. And finally, that was the way the British were able to come in and they established the Glancy Commission. And the Glancy Commission essentially was a travesty. It gave the majority community everything, and that's fine, that's history. But one of the things that stunned me in the Glancy Commission, one of the demands of the Kashmiri Pandits was very fascinating. And the demand was that as the indigenous people of Kashmir, they were the custodians of the water bodies of Kashmir. And they wanted the right to be able to protect the water bodies. The springs, the nags, every little tiny hamlet, maybe 10 Kashmiri Pandit families and 90 Kashmiri Muslim families. But it's the Kashmiri Pandits that protected the nag. And our customs would often involve that we would go and pour milk into the nag and do ceremonies. So we were environmentalists. And Kashmir is gone when it comes to water. To your point, Dal Lake has shrunk. Dal Lake
Completely overgrown with weeds.
to one third its size, original beautiful size. So this is happening all across India. And this is happening all across the world. California and India share one unfortunate distinction that both are amongst the top hotspots when it comes to depletion of water. And the criticality of groundwater is part of the water quotient. In California, during drought years, 60% of the water that you drink comes from these aquifers and groundwater sources. In India, we are the number one consumer of groundwater. We consume more groundwater than the United States and China combined. The United Nations put out a report that in the year 2025, right, Makarandji? A year from today, less than a year from today, I said about the urgency. 2025, they said India, especially in the northern parts, Punjab, Haryana, the breadbasket, the Gangetic Plain, 2025, India will reach the tipping point on its groundwater, after which it will not be able to recover its aquifers and it will not be able to restock this water. I'll give you a very poignant story of the state of Rajasthan, which we know is a desert. Now, uh, I was one of the, I think, first Indians who came to America in 1972 to work on NASA's solar cell program. Solar cells. Solar cells have become big in India. So now somebody decided to give free solar cell operated water pumps to the farmers in Rajasthan. All right, fine. So they gave maybe about 100,000. They were planning to give a lot more, but government programs operate slowly. Now, what has happened? Initially, these solar cell water pumps, they were just working nonstop, churning out water. And there were stories, oh my God, this program is a success. Now there's agriculture where there was desert. But fast forward, today, groundwater in Rajasthan has sunk to 400 feet. That is the limit at which the water pump can suck water. End of the solar cell program, end of the groundwater. It is basically now the world where there is no future. It's a dire situation. And we are now in a world that you can call water wipeout.
That is such a dire situation, which brings me to the end of our conversation today. And I want to ask you, as a water warrior, you've also written a novel called Jala. Tell us a little bit about this novel, because I believe it has a unique perspective on how we might be able to save the day with all these overwhelming difficulties. Even then, we have something in us which may help us out of this terrible crisis that we've got ourselves into.
Yeah, so I'm working on it. Hope to publish it. But uh, if you commit either individually, which is a start, but collectively, which is essential. It is essential that we get, as a society, as a country, as humanity, our collective water quotient up. There's been news about the Bangalore water crisis. India has also the unfortunate distinction that one of the first day zeros that happened was in Chennai. And I think it was in 2019. And day zero is when you open the tap and the entire city has no water. All of the 4 reservoirs had run dry. And the reasons these reservoirs are running dry is 2 things. One, okay, the rains don't come. But second, today, 2/3 of the rivers in the world, and Kaveri River is one of them, these rivers die before they can reach the ocean. That is really sad, that our rivers are dying, our groundwaters are depleting. And so the solutions are there. I explored them. But the solution starts not just me, not just Jala, but each one of us saying, I am a water warrior. And the starting point of becoming a water warrior is to take the first test of the water warrior. The first test of a water warrior is that water was the first mirror. Before there were mirrors, why do you think all young women went to the banks of the river? Yeah, they went to drink water, but they also went to look and see how beautiful they were. So water is a mirror. And the first test of a water warrior is go check out the nearest source, the nearest water body to you. Look at it. It is a mirror of the community around. I remember in Delhi, I was being driven, and there was a rivulet there. In ancient times, it must have been a stream, and people must have enjoyed being next to it and built homes. I asked the driver, what was the name of this river? He didn't know the name. He didn't say, I don't know the name. He gave a very interesting answer. He said, this is no river. This is Gandagi. So the first water warrior test is go see the nearest water body where you live. It will mirror to you what your water consciousness is. If chemical foam is rising in the waters of Bangalore, we can call it a high-tech city, but that's not the reality. That's not the reality. And so that's how we start. We become water warriors by saving the water sources in the communities that we live in. One pond, one lake, one aquifer at a time. We start by recognizing that we don't own water. Water is a gift to all. We get it as part of our birthright. We are water. And this water goes back into the cosmic waters when our existence comes to an end. It is the most precious source that we have of life. And there can be no spirituality, I submit, no spirituality if there isn't water quotient practicality.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm reminded of those verses of the Gita where Krishna also talks about the water cycle, symbolizing the circle of reciprocity, because food comes only because of the rains, and how we have to offer that food. Otherwise, it's like stealing, from nature. And especially your message should go out to everyone in India, because what we consider our sacred rivers are by and large, no better than cesspools and drain pipes for sewage. So the challenge before us is immense, and I want to really thank you for your wisdom today, and I hope that we can continue this discussion, and I also would like to wish you all the success possible for Jala, this very important book whose very title is called Water. Thank you. Thank you, Rakesh.
I appreciate it, Margaret.